Update. I called my husband during my girls' night out and said, "Honey, I met a new friend, his name is Jamar. I'm staying at his place tonight. We're just hanging out. Trust me." I then hung up the phone. The next day, when I got home, I found my house completely empty. In the backyard, there was a big pile of my stuff burning. My neighbor came over and handed me a box. Inside was my marriage certificate, dirty. My husband had used it as a paper in Dub C and left it for me. Part 2. Your respiratory therapist, we're weaning you off the ventilator. Are you in pain? John nodded, the sharp pain in his face making itself known. His legs moved slightly, guided by robotic attachments, making him walk in place while lying down. "I'll get your nurse," Sarah said before disappearing. Later, John woke up more alert. The ventilator was being replaced by a misting blue hose, and he was sitting higher in bed. His legs were now free of the robotic devices, and he felt clearer. It was a busy morning with doctors, nurses, and therapists coming and going. He was moved to another part of the hospital for scans. The nurses praised his progress, though John didn't understand all the medical jargon. They helped him sit in a chair and stand briefly. The doctors assured him that his brain was intact, despite suffering a traumatic brain injury, TBI. One doctor remarked that his shattered skull had prevented his brain from herniating due to swelling. The highlight for John was when they removed the catheter, allowing him to urinate on his own. Simple pleasures, he thought. A few days later, John woke to find several strangers in dark suits gathered around his bed, giving him an uneasy feeling. "Mr. Doe?" said the tallest man with unruly red hair and a gray goatee. His dark eyes looked serious. "I'm Dr. Everett J. Malcolm," he continued without offering a handshake. John swallowed nervously and nodded. Though he still had a trot tube, it had been replaced with a smaller one that would let him speak with a PMV valve, but he didn't have it on now, so he stayed silent. "I represent a medical research consortium," Dr. Malcolm said in a dismissive tone, "involved in cutting-edge medical and biochemical advancements." He shrugged slightly, frowning. "We've monitored your progress for the past 7 weeks and contributed to it. We want to discuss your rehabilitation and other options you might consider." John's shaky hand reached for his dry erase board. He wrote, "What is this about?" Dr. Malcolm read the board and replied, "It's best to first go over your current situation and what led to it before discussing options." He motioned to a woman in a white lab coat with short hair and a stern expression. She stepped forward, holding a tablet. "Mr. Doe," she began, "you've been hospitalized for nearly 2 months." She paused as John attempted to write. "We don't know exactly how you were injured. Passers-by found you and thought you were dead after a severe beating." She showed John gruesome admission photos from the ER. He turned his head to see them clearly. "The ambulance took you to the nearest ER for a death declaration," she continued, "but they found you were barely alive. This was on August 14th. John blinked, processing. "You had no ID, and your fingerprints matched no database. No tattoos, scars, or surgeries to identify you. Facial recognition was impossible." John started writing again, but she stopped him. "It doesn't matter who you are, Mr. Doe. As far as anyone's concerned, you're dead." She showed him a death certificate. "You technically died 3 times in the first week," she paused, "and you've also accumulated a massive medical bill." She flipped the tablet to show over $1 million. "That doesn't even include our life-saving interventions," Dr. Malcolm noted. "You haven't started rehab yet, and you're already deep in debt." John thought, what bedside manner? Dr. Malcolm continued, "Your situation presents unique opportunities we think you should consider before deciding your next steps." A man of East Asian descent stepped forward and bowed slightly at the foot of John's bed. "Mr. Doe," he began, "to be brief, you have a long road ahead before you can hope to return to a normal life. You're still dealing with a serious head injury, more broken bones than I can list, a significant spinal cord injury causing at least partial paralysis on your left side, and your left eye has been destroyed along with much of the surrounding tissue and bone. Additionally, your reproductive organs have been severely damaged, and it's uncertain if your right testicle is still functional." The news was overwhelming, and John struggled to process it. No one had told him the full extent of his injuries until now. He grimaced, trying to remember something concrete, but all he could recall were vague, nightmarish images. Dr. Malcolm cleared his throat, pulling John's focus back. "In a way, you can thank our early intervention for the fact that you're here today," he said, almost casually. "But let's discuss the 2 paths ahead of you." He removed his gold-rimmed glasses, fogged them with his breath, and wiped them with a silk cloth. "You can continue with the current care plan, which involves transferring you to a rehab facility specializing in helping you regain strength, mobility, and independence." He put his glasses back on. "However, with no insurance or substantial payment information, your care will be subpar at best." John felt his anxiety rising again, the urge to flee the room growing stronger amid the cold stares and businesslike suits. Dr. Malcolm's voice cut through the tension. "There's another option." He stepped back, allowing a younger, nervous-looking man with a tablet to approach John's bed. "Mr. Doe," the young man stammered, "before we proceed, we need you to sign some forms." He handed the tablet to John, whose eyes scanned the small print. "You can read it all, of course," the young man added with a weak laugh, "but we'd all be old and gray by the time you finish." He cleared his throat, realizing his joke had fallen flat. "Your first signature gives us authorization to treat you, access to your records, and the power to act on your behalf in legal and medical matters for the immediate future." John hesitated before pressing the yellow signature button. He scribbled his name with his finger. "Great," the young man said, visibly relieved. He flipped to another screen. "The next signatures are important." First, by agreeing to our treatment, you accept the risks and agree not to hold us responsible for any mishaps or adverse outcomes. He winked at John. Don't worry, Mr. Doe. You can click on share and more to see if there is a part 3.